Welcome back to the Titanium Hanger. Happy Friday, everybody. This is Mike. Today I want to talk to you about the evolution of paint from metallic to flat to back, and then what are we going to see in the future? Is it truly just driven by the character? We're going to talk about all this. I'm going to give you some examples, and I did touch on this topic in the past. I actually was going to make this video a year ago, but now we have so many more examples to utilize and so much more stuff coming, and we're going to talk about all this coming up. So all along, Takara has more or less set the expectation on what we expect out of the Masterpiece line. And following suit, early on, Fans Toys and their Dinobots, they had a nice metallic paint. They had some bare plastic on them too, they had vac metallized on them, but for the most part, they had a Toon look, but they looked a bit realistic, kind of the same way the MP10 did. MP10 had some bare plastic here and there, they had some metallic paint, and they had some chrome, and it was kind of a blend of all these different elements that made it look kind of interesting. But still, I do admit the MP10 mold is dated. The Dinobots from Fans Toys still hold up better than MP10 in my opinion. They still kind of carry on those same characteristics, and I love metallic paint. Other companies like X-Transbots did about the same thing back then. That Apollyon, one of the best parts of that figure was the metallic looking paint, that silver that you would think of, even when you think of the cartoon, you knew Megatron was shiny. And the toy, the vintage toy, that vac metallized chrome look to it, this wasn't quite as shiny as, say, the vintage toy, but it got the job done. There was a lot of shine to it, a lot of sheen to it, and it looked really good. Over the years, we saw KFC and some of their offerings, and for me personally, their blaster or their transistor is what got me deeper into third party. So I liked the way it looked. I was really attracted to that metallic paint with that really deep red looking color. And most recently, I've been handling Wreck-Gar. This is the KFC version of Wreck-Gar, and I've started looking at that, and I'm starting to notice elements of this have some metallic looking paint on it, and that makes it look interesting. Again, both of these have some bare plastic to it. Both of these have really well painted aspects of them, which make them both look very premium, and of course, they're worth the price. So one of the things that we had back in the day was shiny looking plastic. So there is something to be said about shiny looking plastic looking good, okay overall, but still kind of cheap. It's that actual paint that gives it that premium look. That metallic looking paint versus just bare plastic, you know it's different than just bare plastic when you look at it, when you handle it. And so with that, it looks good for the X-Transbots version of Cyclonus. They're actually going to come out with this painted also. There's also something to be said about the Fans Toy Sovereign and the Quietus. When you look at how well those are painted, and yes, you put an unpainted figure next to them, you can definitely tell the difference. They kind of stand out on the shelf. It can work, it can match for a while, but I know X-Transbots understands this. That's why they're reissuing theirs painted, and we're going to talk more about that coming up. But these two figures look magnificent, and there are some points with bare plastic, obviously around the joints and those kinds of things, but overall, these things do look amazing, and the paint job is phenomenal. It's night and day, whether they have this metallic paint or they don't. It's a big, big difference with the metallic paint. So when Takara started turning the corner and going with the Toon, they didn't just make them flat plastic, they had some paint on them, and the paint was a flat paint. So when you start looking at their painting their figures with flat paint, then it starts to go in another different direction, and it is a more Toon direction, and even in some cases a Hyper Toon direction. And with the MP36 Megatron, I think it looks pretty good, but I still have the KO Magtin, which is a shiny version. I still kind of prefer that look to this one, and I'm a Hyper Toon kind of guy. So it's one of those things that it's a personal preference, and it's a preference based on the character. So with options out there for some characters having different representations, some having metallic paint, KOs that are metallic painted, and this one actually having a plus version, that's also an option. Looking at the Hound, well, there's really no options out there other than the other third parties that look completely different. I personally like the aesthetic of this, and I do understand why they went with the flat paint on this, because they want it to look super Hyper Toon, and it does. They do pull off that Hyper Toon look, and I don't know, will they ever reissue this thing in a plus with a metallic paint job and go backwards? Nobody really knows. So that flat paint look, I didn't used to like it. It used to kind of bother me because I really do like the metallic paint. But when you start looking at the likes of the Deformation Space Starscream, I got that one and I was like, I like the way this thing looks. And I don't know that I'd want it to have a shiny paint job to it. And the flat paint on it looks good. Now, there are some paint defects in this, which that's, I think, the company getting started or whatever, but there are paint defects on it. I don't think that has to do with the fact that it's a flat paint versus a metallic paint. I think that's just an application process issue, but I've seen quite a few people reporting some paint app errors in the DS01 figure. So hopefully they resolve that for the next 2 upcoming releases. But overall, this thing looks amazing. I like the way this looks, and that flat paint is a big part of it, making it look super duper hyper tuned and fit in with the modern day Takara and the direction that Fans Toys is going. Fans Toys, X Transbots, MMC, they're all jumping on the bandwagon right here. And when you look at the Dune Rider, one of the biggest complaints when that figure came out was this figure is just plain. He's just plain and boring, and I have to admit that I did kind of have that feeling. Like, I'm the hyper-tuned guy, and I got what I asked for right here. Be careful what you ask for, too, because I would have actually liked all the blue on this to be a very vibrant, metallic blue paint, and I could have been happy with the rest of it kind of being flat, but it's more or less, the whole thing's more or less flat. I do think this is a pearlescent, not a pearlescent, but there's some sort of speckle to the blue plastic in there versus it being actually painted. And if it is painted, then it's painted with a flat paint. And X Transbots. So if you look at X Transbots, they're big. It's a big debacle, but maybe it's a recovery story on the lock. I do like the lock 2.0. It works well. It's fine. It's a good figure. But I actually like the paint scheme on the 1.0 better. The colors, the Pantones they used versus the second one. But the second one has apps like the abs and abdominal areas painted. But more than that, it uses a flat paint. And if you actually look at Coot has more or less a flat paint. There are some metallic areas on there too. So going more tuned, I think a lot of the movie characters could lend themselves to having a flat paint, just sort of like the MPO9 Rodimus. It's kind of flat. But what really started to spur this conversation for me was that everybody thought that Fans Toys was going to do whatever they wanted no matter what, but then when they started to change and go towards the Takara direction with the flat paint and the super hyper tune and all of that, that was a bit of a shock to me and some more people in the community. But there's a large group of people out there, or maybe there's a few people that make a lot of noise and they say they wanted the flat paint. They said, do away with this metallic. These are the prototypes. You look at these prototypes, they had metallic paint in the prototype. Complaints. Now we already have Braun with a flatter green, but let's do a comparison here of Sheridan. So on the left is the prototype that Fans Toys was showing off, and then a lot of people started complaining, saying that why is a tank going to be shiny metallic? A tank should be flat paint. I don't get that. This red on the left was what I expected to get. On the right is what we actually got. And so looking at this, I was kind of like, well, where's the metallic? So this was an issue early on, and I was like, well, let's see what we get. And we got it. And I have to say I'm slightly disappointed in Sheridan for it being such a flat paint job versus what I thought we were going to get originally. And Braun itself, Braun looks pretty good, but you get to look at your Braun right now, and you go get to look at your Sheridan right now if you have one, you'll see it's quite flat. Now, I'm not just going to pick on Fans Toys. X Transbots did the exact same thing. They released their pictures of their cup lock years ago. Maybe it was it 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, or something like that. Whenever they released the pictures of lock, it looked like this on the left, and on the right's what we got. Now, you look at the picture on the left, you can see that it has a shiny metallic paint to it, and then they went to a flat paint scheme. But looking at it, the only thing I thought was off on the original prototype cup was I thought that the thighs were just a little bit off on the color. They should have changed the color, but still kept the sheen for me. So now, knowing X Transbots, will they go back and repaint it with a shiny metallic paint like this? Probably, because, X Transbots like to put the figures out. They like to do G2 colors, and with that, that's a good option there to give it the metallic look. And then they're going back and they're repainting their Cyclonus metallic, so maybe they're going to go metallic on pretty much everything that they've made. And I'm not going to lie, I absolutely like the Robot Paradise. I like that figure, and it has some flatness to it. It has some shine, it has some sheen, but overall, it doesn't quite have the metallic paint scheme that we got with the Takara. And the Takara one is more of a silver metallic kind of look to it And a lot of people feel like the Robot Paradise is a little bit too plain or too bland. Unless, of course, they handle it themselves, then they know it looks pretty good in person. I do like that they added some accents so you could give it a little bit more real-world feel if you choose to, or you can leave it hyper-tuned. But obviously they're living in the very tuned space for now, and looking at it side by side, a lot of people still prefer the metallic look of the first one, even if the design of Robot Paradise is better than Takara's. So I want to touch on repaints and what we see with repainted figures. And the Phoenix, which is one of the first repaints that we saw from Fans Toys when it comes to pretty much the same color scheme. They're not trying to go G2 or anything like that, but going from a standard bot, which is pretty much bare plastic, to one with a pearlescent look of the white. I don't think that pearlescent is all paint. Of course, I haven't scratched it. I haven't barely even messed with that figure because I don't want to scratch anything on it. But the biggest noticeable difference is looking at the backpack, and that backpack part that went from bare red plastic to a metallic painted red. It looks so much better. It looks like a premium figure. And the first one, if you look at them side by side, the first one looks less premium than the second one, and all that changed was that backpack and a little bit of pearlescent plastic. I don't think that's all paint, but that backpack being painted with that metallic makes it look so much better. Now I'm going to touch on a couple of these Fans Toys repaints that they still had a metallic paint, a nice sheen to them, going from the Sovereign to the Sovereign M. Both of them look great. One of them is deeper purple, one of them's more of a blue. They both look purple in hand. This picture makes it look more blue than it really is. Same thing with Quietus. The Quietus going from a more on the right, the more blue, to the more purple. So the opposite directions there. They went from one being purple to blue, and then this one being blue to purple. But anyhow you slice it, though, they both look good. Either iteration, either combination, they look good on the shelf for their Cyclonus and their Galvatron. And all metallic. So Transistor reissued theirs, well, KFC with the Transistor, reissued their figure with no paint on the red area. Now, this has nothing to do with trying to be tuned. This actually has to do with the fact that people were complaining about that metallic paint shipping off. And that was a big problem. In my understanding, and I actually read something about, hey, this is coming out, and this was in news somewhere, that they did it so that you don't have the paint shipping. And so that was kind of the thought process there. Maybe that's not at all. Maybe they were trying to be more tuned. But looking at it side by side, I still like the one on the left better. So what does the future hold? We just got the Huffer, or it's on the way. People are getting the Fans Toys Huffer. That looks great. It looks nice. It does have a shiny metallic paint. Now, this picture doesn't really show it very well. I've seen some in-hand images that make this thing look amazing. Like, it just bling bling way more than the other mini bots. And maybe it's just because this character or whatever, they decided to give it the full paint treatment. I don't know. But if you look on the left, the pipes coming out, that's the flattest looking paint job I've ever seen. Just kidding. That is just a prototype grayscale. I know that. I'm trying to be fun here. Now, their Outback looks like it's going to be following the same thing they did with their Brawn. It's going to have a painted sort of a brown metallic chest piece and the torso area, and then the limbs are going to be flat painted. So that's kind of the trend they're going with this figure, I guess, or this mold. But this thing is a heavy, heavy retool of Brawn. It looks like the X-Transbot's Jansen is coming out swinging with a very good metallic, deep paint job. That thing looks amazing, and even the pictures in hand show this is a nice metallic paint job. They're not going flat on this bad boy at all. And this one, I always think of Perceptor as one of the movie bots, and a lot of the movie bots were flat, like just bare plastic that Transbots made in the past, and now they're reissuing like Cyclonus with a metallic paint job. Also, we've got this one metallic paint job, and going forward, but we just got the Lock that was flat. And MMC is reissuing their Skylinks. Now, the thing about the Skylinks is that the one on the left was more of a toy color, and the right supposed to be toon color. And when it comes to metallic paint, is it still going to be applied where it was applied on the first one? And now, I don't know. I haven't handled the first one, so I don't know where the paint was. But it looks like on the lower chest of this one, the new one, looks like some shiny paint there, and on the feet, and maybe even the lower legs. So looks like they're going to carry forward, just change colors, and they're going to keep the exact same kind of sheen to what they had going on before. While We see X-Transbots, I guess, just figuring out how to make a buck. Some of their metallic painted figures are coming out with versions that are more Toon or less metallic paint. So it's all over the place with X-Transbots. And is it good thing that you get an option? Yes. It's good that you get options. Do you like metallic? Do you like flat paint? What is your preference? Can they coexist side by side? Is it going to be like one release has flat paint and the other has metallic? Because that's exactly how it looks like it's coming in the future. It looks like we see a flat painted version. This is the way it looks on this figure here for Cerebros. That looks like a flat paint. But this one here, the Chomp, looks like it's got metallic on the chest and then flat everywhere else. But again, Chomp has to fit in with older figures that were in an older scheme that were more or less flat plastic. So the future's up to you. What you gonna do? Looking at Takara, they have a really well painted MP10. X-Transbots is gonna match that with a very well painted Magnus. And so with that, they're all following Takara, but they're also doing their own thing. What do you think? Which do you prefer? And do you want to see flat painted figures reissued in metallic? Do you want them all to be flat painted in the future? Or is the metallic paint what draws you to the masterpiece and makes it feel premium? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Titanium Hanger out.